Fellow cardboarders, welcome back. Today I've got a doozy of a deck for you, which is a Tatyova pEDH deck. We're gonna look at all the cards I put in here together and my thought process and all the combos that are also in here. Believe it or not, you can build beautiful combos in Pauper, and Tatyova still smacks. Welcome to Think Outside the Deck box. And this is Tatyova. Let's look at her for a second. This beautiful artwork here from Commander Masters. This Merfolk costs 3, a green and a blue, is a 3/3 and has the simple effect of landfall. So whenever a land enters the battlefield, I draw a card and gain 1 life. And this deck can be built quite strongly in normal EDH, I must say. So the challenge was to find out how strong you could build a Pauper EDH deck with Tatyova at the front. And I was quite surprised how this deck turned out. Normally this deck wins at around turn 7 or 8 latest with some kind of combo. And yeah, it's a ton of fun, mostly for me. And my opponents most of the time can just watch me win if I get that far, if they let me. So I split the deck into 8 categories. So we have the commander here, that's 1 I guess. We have the ramp pile, the card draw pile, the removal pile. Then we have a recursion pile, as well as a combo pile, a tutor pile, and a lands pile. And stick around till the end for the lands, because there are also some unique inclusion. As you can see, there's the Scorched Desert here, the Sun-Scorched one. This one is in here for a reason. So stick around till the end to see why this land is in there and what other lands are in here that can actually also win the game. But now, first of all, let's look at crop rotation. You can sacrifice a land and get a land you want from your deck onto the battlefield. So you get a Tatyova trigger again, and normally most of the time you want to pick the Mystic Sanctuary here out of your deck, since this will be one of our combo pieces. And it's an important land that later on in the game lets you put an instant or sorcery card on top of your library. So keep that in mind, we'll keep it up here for now. Then we have the classic Wayfarer's Bauble. Everyone should know it, I guess. Stop the video if you don't know it. Got the Skyshroud Ranger that lets you put a land from your hand onto a battlefield. This Sakura Lady also lets you do the same thing, as does the Scaled Herbalist. There's also a Llanowar Scout that also lets you do that, but I tried to keep the cards that let me ramp at around 20-ish. So yeah, maybe you want to include that, or the other could swap them out. We're also playing Steve here, as well as 3 Visits and Nature's Lore, classical ramp cards, all common. Keep that in mind, this deck is all commons. So obviously Tatyova can be built even stronger by including rares as well, Rampant Growth, Farseek, but the challenge of this deck and for the channel was to build a Pauper deck. By the way, I do want to bring back the commander vote. I just was swamped at work, and now summer holidays are coming and I am trying to get more videos up per week again. Colony Heart Expedition has landfall and counts how many lands are entering throughout its existence, and when you hit 3 you can sacrifice it and get another 2 lands onto the battlefield. So great for Tatyova, you always draw more lands, draw more cards with your lands and get more life. So life points and a full hand shouldn't be a problem, which is awesome in Pauper. Let me tell you, these are the same card.
Corporate needs you to find the differences between this picture and this picture. Intel has told us there are at least 7.
Okay, I already see one. Give him. Okay.
They're the same picture.
As most of you know, you have Harrow here, beautiful card from Tempest, the original one. Far Wanderings, also an undervalued card, and in my eyes should be played more often, since the threshold you can reach easily throughout a commander game. Got the Farhaven Elf, which also just ramps you, and the Wood Elves, which are strictly better since they allow you to ramp for a forest card. So duels are also allowed to be fetched. And yeah, believe it or not, there are Pauper duels that this one can fetch, which I will show you later on. And then we have the Skyshroud Claim. And as you might have noticed, I sorted the ramp by mana value. So we started with the 1 mana value and then we went down to 2 and 3. And this one was the last one with 4 mana. This should be around 19, I think. So around about 20. We also have some in the card draw pile that also let us ramp. So yeah, plus or minus 20 ramp cards and you're great to go. We're playing the classical Brainstorm just to be able to manipulate our deck, top deck and hand. And then we fetch for a new land to shuffle the bad cards that we don't need anymore back into our library. Ponder similarly lets you manipulate the top of the deck, and we might even shuffle. Gitaxian Probe, another great cantrip that replaces itself and you get some information. Beautiful cantrip if your graveyard is full. This one just costs 1 blue mana most of the time, and then you have an Ancestral Recall. Gush, we have a ton of mana on our battlefield, so putting 2 islands back to our hand is most of the time even an advantage for us because we can play more lands afterwards. And we're even rewarded with more cards. Deep Analysis is a good card, most of the time the second time we cast it, because 4 mana for 2 cards isn't best, but being able to flash it back for 2 mana and 3 life shouldn't be underestimated. Tragic Lesson, we draw 2 cards and then we either discard a card, also not too bad, we have a full hand most of the time, or we return a land back to our owner's hand, and yeah, we can play it again, which is great. Triggers Tatyova and we draw more cards. You get the idea by now, I guess. Frantic Search, solid card, replaces itself by untapping another 3 lands, and this is beautiful with like the Simic Growth Chamber that taps for 2 or any utility land, you name it. Then we have a card not many people have probably seen, which is the Whispers of the Muse, and not many people will have played it. So for 1 and 5 for buyback, you can draw a card, and if you paid the buyback costs, you get it back to your hand. So for 6 mana, you can draw a card continuously. This isn't the best card, and I also, in the couple of games that I played it, haven't played it for the buyback cost, but sometimes you are stuck, and then, well, drawing a card for 6 mana, if you haven't anything else to do, you will do that at instant speed. And yeah, with infinite mana, you can draw infinitely, so I think I actually used it for drawing infinitely, so yeah. Keep that in mind. To be able to draw infinitely, this card could also go in here. We have Explore, which is what I mentioned earlier, another ramp card, but especially draws you a card if we don't have another land in our hand. Well, we can't play it. Similarly, the Growth Spiral, we can put another land from our hand into play and draw a card before. And the Eureka Moment, again, for 5, we draw 2 cards and may play another land. So that should have been like 12 card draw cards or so. Let's go to our removal pile. So we're playing a couple of counter spells just to be sure that our combo pieces are safe, and maybe we're far ahead and someone wants to play a board wipe or something like that. Maybe we don't like that. Of course, we're playing some counter spells. We do have a bunch of mana open most of the time, so being able to pay the replicate costs often enough so that the spell is countered shouldn't be a problem. Of course, we're also playing foil that lets us discard an island and another card to pay it for free. This is our Force of Will actually in Pauper. We have Mana Leak that counters if the opponent doesn't pay 3. Negate to counter a non-creature spell, and the classic counterspell. Then we are playing some Graveyard Exiler just to be sure that our Reanimator opponents don't get too far ahead. We're also playing Return to Nature if something is too annoying on the board as an artifact, enchantment, or yeah, a single card in a graveyard. And then we're playing 4 cards that also disable creatures. So Witness Protection turns a creature into a 1/1 business person. I really love this card, it's so silly. And they lose all abilities. Similarly, the Lingify turns into a 0/4 Tree Folk. Now it can't even attack. Similarly, the Frog and the Completion of Tamiya, which just simply taps the creature and even has flash. So this one is more expensive than the others that only cost 1 or 2. This one has flash, but also can disable an artifact or planeswalker. So keep that in mind, it's quite versatile. Now on to our next pile, which is the recursion pile. We are playing the Scrivener, which is the worst of this cycle here, which I'll return an instant card in this case, or a sorcery card in the case of the others. And this is quite important because these will be the ones that bring back our combo cards, the combo instants. From the sorceries in this deck, most of the time we don't need any. Most of these sorceries are ramp cards and we're not really looking forward to ramping again. Rather just get another card draw card and draw it further into the deck rather than getting a single land. But yeah, we have 4 cards that could also get a sorcery, but the restriction of the Scrivener, just being able to return an instant card, isn't too bad. And the others, as I already said, return any instant or sorcery card. Keep those in mind, these will be important in a couple of minutes. And then we also play Reclaim, which also simply puts a card, any card, from our graveyard back on top of our library. Now, let's look how this deck wants to win. Let's look at the combos. You already looked at Displace, which blinks 2 of our creatures. So most of the time we choose, for example, the Scrivener and another creature, and we blink him. He goes to exile, comes back, and as this spell resolves, this blink spell, it goes into the graveyard. Then the Scrivener effect is put onto the stack and it chooses and sees the Displace in the graveyard, and you can target it and bring it back to your hand. So you are able to infinitely blink the Scrivener and get the Displace out of your graveyard if you have infinite mana, which is a thing that this deck does. And yeah, keep in mind, you can also exile a second creature. So that would mean with infinite mana, we could, for example, blink one of our creatures that put a land from our deck onto the battlefield and filter out all the lands from our deck. That is a possibility. You will see in a sec which other creatures we want to blink. They are in this pile here. We're also playing Ghostly Flicker, which is the strictly better version than Displace, but redundancy is important. The important creature here is the Peregrine Drake. Most of you already know. So for 5, you get a creature that untaps 5 lands. Back in the day, it wasn't the best creature. Didn't have that many blink flicker spells, but being able to untap lands like the Simic Growth Chamber that taps for 2, you get 1 mana plus. And if you infinitely blink him, you actually get infinite mana. Similarly, the Cloud of Fairies, which is a worse version of the Drake, which just untaps 2 lands, is another piece that could help us with a combo. And how we want to combo and how we want to get infinite mana is with High Tide. So, and how this combo works is this: you have a couple of islands on the battlefield, you cast High Tide, it goes into your graveyard, and now your lands tap for double the mana. You have the Drake on the battlefield as well, and you start the blinking combo with, for example, the Scrivener here on the battlefield as well. You blink those 2 for 3 mana. Remember, you have double the mana. You get the Scrivener on the battlefield and get Ghostly Flicker back into your hand, since this resolved first before the effect comes onto the stack. And then you have the Drake as well that enters and untaps your doubling islands, which tap for 10 mana when it untaps the 5 lands. And yeah, let's cast the Ghostly Flicker over and over and over again, adding you more and more, and yeah, infinite mana. Similarly here, this also works with the displays. What doesn't work right away is with the Cloud of Fairies, since it will only untap 2 of your lands. But what you can do is cast High Tide multiple times by returning it back to your hand over and over again, as well as the Ghostly Flicker, for example with 2 of your Archaeomancers, Scriveners, Salvagers, you name it. Return both of them and get a kind of like High Tide Storm counter going by increasing your islands from 1 mana to 2 mana, 3 mana, 4, 5 mana per tapped island. And then the Cloud of Fairies, which untaps 2 lands, would untap, for example, 2 islands that both tap for 5 mana. And then you can get the combo going with the Cloud of Fairies as well. Another thing we do when we have infinite mana is Capsize, which is hard to read here in this version, but I had this one lying around and I like to blink out my Pauper decks as well if I can, and if I have such a fancy version, why not put it in? This one is great just simply for the buyback effect, and for 6 you can just simply remove a card, but with infinite mana you will remove each permanent, including lands, back to their owner's hands, leaving your opponents open to everything. And yeah, as soon as they play a land, you get back to your combo, it's all instant speed, and you put their land right back into their hand. So yeah, they can't play it anymore, and you will just hit them with your few creatures that you have. Stream of Thought is another one that with infinite mana lets your opponents be milled out infinitely, because it has Replicate for 4. Normally you wouldn't play this card, but yeah, in this deck, Pauper, infinite mana, it's great and a great way to win. Blink of an Eye is another way to win. There is also Into the Royal, which has the same effect. So 2 cards with the exact same effect, but different names and yeah, different sets.
They're the same picture.
So oftentimes at the beginning of your game you just simply want to remove a card, so it's like a removal card, like Ablight Seal Colossus comes your way and you're like, ugh, let's use Blink of an Eye, and it's gone for a turn. And you also draw a card if you pay the kicker costs. But again, with infinite blink and infinite mana, you can also use Blink of an Eye or Enter the Royal to return the whole board instead of with Capsize. Then we have Moment's Peace. This one just simply can protect us with a little fog, and it has flashback, but maybe we don't have our combo pieces that far that we can win, but we still have infinite mana and can infinitely protect us. So we can infinitely return it back to our hand, and we can cast this one for each opponent during their combat step to prevent their attacks. And then lastly we have Tidal Bore, again another card that taps or untaps a card and can be played for free. So this one most of the time will not be a combo. Also this doesn't really let us win, but it can infinitely tap our opponent's creatures, so it's similarly working like the Moment's Peace if we wanted to, but most of the time it's for the returning an island and being able to play it again. But yeah, if we're desperate, this card could also save us. So these were all the combos that I found in this deck, besides the lands that I will come to in a moment. I bet some of you maybe even already know one or the other combo. Let me know in the comments below which other combo could be played with these cards. This is the tutor section, which lets us tutor for specific cards so that we go to our combo faster. So the Drift here has Transmute. We're mostly not playing it as a blocker, and can tutor for any card that costs 3 mana, and most of the time it will be our Ghostly Flicker, which costs 3, so if we don't have it, we're gonna tutor it. Then we have the Step Through card, which lets us tutor for a wizard card, and all of these, not all of them, 3 of these are wizards, I think. Maybe the Scrivener is also a wizard. Back in the day it was a townsfolk, I don't know.
Blimey, Harry, didn't you ever wonder where your mum and dad learned it all? Learn what?
You're a wizard, Harry.
I'm a what?
But we can tutor for them if we don't have any. 5 of these are played. One of them we should be able to tutor to be able to get our cards back. Muddle the Mixture, another card that has Transmute, but is also a solid counter spell. This one could tutor also for the Cloud of Fairies or the Into the Royal card, depending on what we need. But we should always keep in mind when we transmute what is in our deck and what isn't. Could also look for the Tidal Bore if we want. Yeah. So this one is more like a 50-50 thing. Sometimes we're going to use it as a counter. Some of the times we're going to use it for the transmute. Expedition map will look for one of these 2 lands probably, which we're going to talk in a moment. And lastly, the Merchant Scroll just gets us any of our blue instant cards. So again, Ghostly Flicker, High Tide, you name it, Stream of Thought. No, Stream of Thought it can't look for since it only looks for instants. But yeah, quite an important card to include in this deck if you want it to go more smoothly and get to your combo pieces faster. Now lastly, and I hope you enjoyed this video, follow me on all these socials here and leave a sub to the channel if you enjoyed this video, because I will do more Pauper stuff in the future, but of course also normal Commander decks as well on the channel. So the Mystic Sanctuary here is an interesting card to be included, since the Ghostly Flicker also allows us to blink lands. So we exile the Mystic Sanctuary and it comes back. This one is already on the graveyard after it resolved, and the Mystic Sanctuary sees the Ghostly Flicker in the graveyard and is able to put it on top of our library. This one enters the land and also triggers Tatyova, which lets us draw a card and gain a life. So we actually get the Ghostly Flicker back into our hand with the Mystic Sanctuary, which is why this land is quite important in our deck, all given that you have 3 or more islands on the battlefield already. So this is just another way to get your instant sorceries back, and it could also get you your High Tide again, you know, like keep that in mind. And if you don't have Mystic Sanctuary yet, I don't know what you're doing here. Get a couple of Mystic Sanctuaries in your collection. This one is just beautiful in any blue deck included, and also included in any Pauper deck that plays blue. Then the Sunscorched Desert, similarly, with Ghostly Flicker and Infinite Mana, can actually flicker the Sunscorched Desert infinitely and deal exactly 1 damage to any player. And yeah, do this 120 times and all your opponents are probably dead. So that's also a fun combo. I haven't used it yet though, but yeah, it seems like a fun way to kill your opponents, and it's great to have a plan C or D when some of your combo pieces are already taken out, exiled, you name it. We're playing a whole bunch of the Panorama lands here because these will trigger Tatyova a second time when you fetch for another land. So these luckily enter untapped first, and then the land that you fetch for enter tapped, but you could also just use them right away when you play them if you need them. We're also playing the classical Pauper fetch lands with the Evolving Wilds and the Terramorphic Expanse. These are the Pauper duels I talked about from Dominaria United and Kaldheim. These have the forest and island subtypes, so they are able to, for example, be fetched with the Skyshard claim, since it does say forest cards, or I already mentioned the Wood Elves, which also looks for a forest card, and since this is a forest card, they are able to also fetch non-basic lands if you need them. These enter tapped though, so that's the downside of Pauper, but yeah, it fixes your mana. Classic command tower as well as the Simic Growth Chamber that I already mentioned. And then lastly, we're playing like 13 islands as well as 11 forests if I am not mistaken. The whole deck list is in the description below. But now I do want to hear from you. Let me know which cards you would have included as well. Maybe I forgot some. What's your favorite combo? Which combo did I forget to explain? Explain them in the comments below so I learned something new and everyone else who's playing or trying to play this deck can also learn from you. I have built several Pauper decks in the last couple of weeks and months and tried them out, so there will be more Pauper content coming on this channel, so do subscribe to this channel so you don't miss out on any of these videos, but there will also be normal decks showcased on this channel as well. We have a whole bunch of bundle openings and vintage cards, as well as Portal 3 Kingdoms, all coming back to the channel now that there's summer holidays again. I'm currently, maybe you heard, on my best way to recovery, so do click the left button to support the channel and the right one for another beautiful video ready for you to be watched. See you there and have a good one. Bye bye.